I'm very glad that you attend to my presentation. I'm Qianying Liu, a graduate student at Southern University. Today, the topic of my speech is data bias. With the widespread application of the large datasets and machine algorithms, companies and data analysts have discovered that data bias is one of the important factors affecting the accuracy. Today, I will introduce to you three concepts related to the data bias. What is data bias? How does data bias occur? And how to minimize data bias. Let's go from the definition of data bias. The word bias is derived from the French vocabulary, describing an oblique line or a deviation from the horizontal. It used to describe the systematic favoritism toward a certain group of people. This word has traveled into field of data science to describe a deviation from our expectation. We can understand the data bias from another angle. It is not a known error, but a potential hazard. Like when we use data for statistics and forecasting, we will not directly cause error in results due to the data bias. But data bias is a risk of the possible mistakes in decision making. After understanding what data bias is, we will talk about the circumstances under which bias will occur. Based on the article of Data Bias and Diversity and Inclusion, and also my own summary, I think the bias will mainly occur in three aspects. Firstly, the error of the initial data. In the process of collecting raw data, we will encounter many of problems, such as missing data, wrong data, or unreliable data sources. Then, the bias comes from the design, including the designer's conscious or unconscious subjective bias when they are in modeling, as well as the bias errors in the model itself. In the example of population density statistics, some designer thinks that in a specific area, a population of less than 50 can be ignored. But some designers think that a population of less than 10 can be ignored. This is the bias of the design process. Finally, the bias comes from the process of using the model. After the model is built, if we use a large model to predict the results of a small volume, provided that the model itself has no problems, but it may lead to bias in the prediction results. Alright, we know that data bias is a hidden danger. So how could we reduce the data bias? Our goal is to minimize data bias and optimize our forecasting models to help companies and analysts to make better decisions. According to the three situations of bias, there are three specific suggestions here. The first one is to use or collect more inclusive datasets and repeatedly check the quality of the data before we use it in model. In response to the designer's subjective bias, having a more diverse workforce that allows for a company to anticipate, spot, or review issues of unfair bias. Finally, I suggest that building a variety of models and work hard to optimize the models. There are as many alternatives as possible to make the comparisons when we use the forecastings, which can offset the negative impact of the existing data bias. Alright, to summarize my presentation around the topic of the data bias, I introduced you to the definition of data bias, the three situations of data bias, and based on these three situations, I give three suggestions for minimizing the bias. That's all. Thanks for your time.